Good morning, student. Today our topic is anatomy of lacrimal apparatus. This is an interesting and important topic, and it is asked for your university question as a essay question. What is lacrimal apparatus? The lacrimal apparatus consists of the lacrimal glands that secrete the lacrimal fluid and the lacrimal passages that drain the lacrimal fluid into the nasal cavity. Next, we see about the components of lacrimal apparatus. These are lacrimal gland, lacrimal ducts, conjunctival sac, lacus lacrimalis, and lacrimal puncta, lacrimal canaliculi, lacrimal sac, and nasolacrimal duct. There are two types of system, secretory system and drainage system. The lacrimal glands and accessory lacrimal glands belongs to secretory system, and drainage system includes lacrimal ducts, conjunctival sac, lacrimal punctum and canaliculus, and lacrimal sac and nasolacrimal duct. Next, let us discuss about the secretory part of the lacrimal apparatus. The lacrimal gland. The lacrimal gland is a serous acini gland. So hence the tears are watery in consistency. It has two parts, larger orbital part and smaller palpebral part. The gland is J-shaped and it is intended by the tendon of levator palpebrae superioris muscle. The orbital part is situated in the lacrimal fossa on the inferior aspect of the orbital plate of frontal bone. The palpebral part is located inside the lateral part of the upper eyelid. As far as the lacrimal gland concerned, they are main lacrimal gland and two named accessory lacrimal gland. They are gland of Croix located in the fornicis and gland of Wolfram located in the middle of the eyelid. The main lacrimal gland is essential for reflex tear secretion. That is, whenever corneal and conjunctival irritation will result in reflex secretion of tears. But the accessory lacrimal glands, they take care of basal secretion. That is, they are for the normal nutrition of the eyeball. This is called basal secretion. This is secreted by the accessory lacrimal gland. Next, coming to the lacrimal ducts. The ducts of lacrimal gland are about a dozen in number. Some ducts drain the orbital part and others drain the palpebral part. But all ducts traverse through the palpebral part. These ducts opens into the conjunctival sac near the superior fornix. When the palpebral part of the gland is surgically removed, all the ducts are also removed, resulting in a condition where production of lacrimal fluid takes place, but its drainage is hampered. Next, coming to the conjunctival sac. The superior fornix of the conjunctival sac receives the lacrimal fluid from lacrimal ducts. The fluid is transferred to the conjunctival sac for spreading evenly to form a thin film over the cornea and conjunctiva. Next, let us see about the punctum. Punctum is a small round orifice 0.2 mm in diameter lying on an elevation called lacrimal papillae. There are two punctum, upper punctum and lower punctum. Next, the lacrimal canaliculus. It begins at the lacrimal punctum and is 10 mm long. It has vertical part which is 2 mm long and horizontal part which is 8 mm long. And there is a dilated ampulla at the bend. Both canaliculi open close to each other in the lateral wall of the lacrimal sac behind the medial palpebral ligament. Next is the lacrimal sac. It is a membranous sac 12 mm long and 5 mm wide. It is situated in the lacrimal groove behind the medial palpebral ligament. Its upper end is blind and lower end is continuous with the nasolacrimal duct. The sac is related anteriorly to the medial palpebral ligament and posteriorly to the lacrimal part of the orbicularis oculi muscle and laterally by the lacrimal fascia and minute fluxes of veins, and medially it is separated from the middle meatus by the lacrimal groove. Next, coming to the nasolacrimal duct, it is a membranous passage 18 mm long. It begins at the lower end of the lacrimal sac. It runs downwards, backwards, and laterally and opens into the inferior meatus of the nose. It is an MCQ, that is where the nasolacrimal duct opens. It opens into the inferior meatus of the nose. A fold of mucous membrane called valve of Hasner. It is an imperfect valve at the lower end of the duct. Coming to the blood supply, it is supplied by the lacrimal branch of ophthalmic artery. Venous drainage into the lacrimal vein and lymphatic drainage to the preauricular group of lymph nodes. The next topic is very important topic, that is nerve supply of lacrimal gland. The nerve supply of lacrimal gland, it is parasympathetic nerves and sympathetic nerves. The parasympathetic nerve, it is secretomotor to the lacrimal gland, and sympathetic nerve, it is vasomotor to the lacrimal. Student, just follow this picture. The nerve in black color is parasympathetic nerve and nerve in red color is sympathetic nerve. First, let us trace out the parasympathetic nerve supply. The parasympathetic preganglionic fibers arises from the lacrimatory nucleus in the pons and carried through the nervous intermediates of the facial nerve. That it is the sensory part of the facial nerve, and it enters into the geniculate ganglion. At the geniculate ganglion without relay, that is there is no synapse, and it passes through the greater superficial petrosal nerve. At this point, it is going to join by the sympathetic nerve that arises from the spinal cord. The sympathetic nerve, it arises from the spinal cord and it reaches the superior cervical ganglion. At the time, the postganglionic fibers, it arises as the deep petrosal nerve. The greater superficial petrosal nerve of parasympathetic and deep petrosal nerve of sympathetic, it is going to join together and enter into the pterygoid canal as Vidian nerve. What is Vidian nerve? It is greater superficial petrosal nerve plus deep petrosal nerve together is called Vidian nerve or nerve of pterygoid canal. Then the nerve of pterygoid canal, it reaches the pterygopalatine ganglion for relay. From the pterygopalatine ganglion, the postganglionic fibers arise and these fibers pass through the zygomatic nerve. It is a branch of maxillary nerve, and from the zygomatic nerve it passes through the lacrimal nerve. It is a branch of ophthalmic nerve, and finally it enters and supplies the lacrimal gland. Two syndromes related to the lacrimal gland, that is crocodile tears and Fraze syndrome. Before going to crocodile tears, we should know about the salivary gland nerve fibers pathway. The parasympathetic nerve supply of salivary gland, it arises from the superior salivary nucleus, and the preganglionic fibers pass along with the nervous intermediates and it enters into the geniculate ganglion. From the geniculate ganglion through cauda tympani nerve, it enters into the submandibular ganglion. In this ganglion, the fibers synapse and postganglionic fibers arise from here and it supplies the submandibular salivary gland and sublingual salivary gland. The gustatory lacrimation or crocodile tear syndrome is the shedding of tears while eating. This occurs in patients with Bell's palsy. In the recovery period following facial nerve injury, the regenerating salivary nerve fibers misdirected and it is ultimately innervate the lacrimal gland instead of submandibular gland. So any stimuli such as the smell or taste, instead of causing salivation, they will lacrimate. So it is called gustatory lacrimation or otherwise called Bogart syndrome. Next syndrome is Fraze syndrome, that is gustatory sweating. Whenever the patient eats, there is sweating in front of the ear. This will be discussed in detail when taking the parotid gland. Let us see the quick recap of nerve supply of the lacrimal gland. Parasympathetic nerve supply, it is secretomotor to the lacrimal gland, and sympathetic nerve, it is vasomotor. The parasympathetic nerve, it arises from the lacrimated nucleus of the pons, and it passes through the nervus intermedius, and it passes to the geniculate ganglion, and from the geniculate ganglion it goes through the greater petrosal nerve, and it joins with the deep petrosal nerve of the sympathetic fiber. These greater superficial petrosal nerve and deep petrosal nerve join to form the nerve of pterygoid canal, otherwise called Vidian nerve. This nerve of pterygoid canal, it enters into the pterygopalatine ganglion and it releases. From here, postganglionic fibers pass through the zygomatic nerve. From the zygomatic nerve, it enters into the lacrimal nerve, and ultimately the lacrimal nerve supplies the lacrimal gland. Next, coming to the applied aspect of the lacrimal gland. First one is the congenital dacrocystitis. What is congenital dacrocystitis? It is inflammation of the lacrimal sac in the newborn. And next, coming to the acute dacrocystitis, that is acute inflammation of the lacrimal sac, and it is an exacerbation of the chronic dacrocystitis. Here there is lacrimal abscess and stage of lacrimal fistula. This is chronic dacrocystitis. It has 4 stages: stage of catarrhal, and stage of mucosal, and chronic suppurative dacrocystitis, and stage of chronic fibrotic sac. The treatment is by dacrocystorhinostomy. The tear film consists of 3 layers: outer lipid or oily layer, and middle aqueous layer, and inner mucous layer. The outer lipid or oily layer is secreted by meibomian gland, Seize gland, and Moll gland. Aqueous layer is by the lacrimal gland, and mucous layer is by the goblet cells. The tear films keeps the cornea and conjunctiva moist, and it provides oxygen to the conjunctival epithelium and washes away the debris, and it prevents infection due to presence of antibacterial substances. Next applied aspect is dry eye. This is due to aqueous tear deficiency, otherwise called Sjogren's syndrome. Here the eye is very dry. Next applied aspect is epiphora or watery eyes. What is epiphora? It is excessive tear secretion or excessive lacrimation. What are the causes? It may be physiological cause or mechanical obstruction. The physiological cause may be lacrimal pump failure, and mechanical obstruction is by obstruction in lacrimal passage at the level of punctum, canaliculus, lacrimal sac, or nasolacrimal duct. Next one is dacroadenoitis, that is swelling of the lacrimal gland. It may be due to secondary to systemic infections, and chronic dacroadenoitis is due to TB. That's all about the applied aspect. Thank you, students.